Welcome back to Saving the Republic with Joe Staten, presented by Grab Your Gear Network, where we speak to people who get up and work hard every single day and don't just sit on their phone and scroll. So if that's you, you might want to check out our content. We have a plethora of offerings. We have military news, prep news, in-depth, long-form podcasting content on our YouTube channel, our TikTok, our Instagram. So make sure you check us out at Grab Your Gear Network. Now, this show specifically, Saving the Republic, is about quite literally saving the Republic, but doing so by bringing you guys relevant news coverage that you probably didn't hear about today. And I do that because I follow many independent journalists on my Twitter account. I keep tabs on the news throughout the day, and I'm going to bring you guys a show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as of right now, exploring the three most impactful stories of the day, sometimes a couple more stories depending on the news cycle. And today we have a very big story, and that is the Kamala Krash. Okay, so we're seeing a bump of Kamala Harris in the polls. She's been shown to have a lead over President Trump, former President Trump, in a couple different polls. Rasmussen today released a poll showing her up 5 points nationally in the former president. Now, there is a mixing of polling results. I'm going to pull up those results really quickly here from Real Clear Politics. As we can see, there's definitely a shift right now. Trump is still up 1.2 points nationally on average. But as you can see, Harris has a +4 margin in a daily KOS poll. She has a +1 margin in a Reuters poll. So she's making up some ground, and the stock market is responding to this. And this also follows on a really bad jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, not great news for the Biden-Harris administration. Maybe we should just start calling it the Harris administration, since Vice President Harris is effectively the president and also the candidate for president for the Democratic Party. But look at this jobs report here. This is some pretty stark data. So unemployment hit a peak since 2021, October of 2021, hitting 4.3%. And the U.S. added 114,000 jobs, which is 35% lower than expectations. And quite frankly, that's not great economic data to run on as a presidential ticket, and I'll explain why. This is, like I said, the worst data we've seen since 2021, which was in the middle of a recovery after the COVID pandemic and the trillions of dollars of spending and inflation and the hole we dug ourselves in. This is the worst numbers we've seen. And partially you could argue, okay, it might be due to the Federal Reserve maintaining their interest rates, refusing to cut rates, which I'm going to get into a little bit later in the video. But these numbers show a stark reality, and that is a stagnating economy. A lot of the jobs we've seen added under the Biden administration are part-time jobs or jobs given to undocumented workers, which can be sometimes hard to track. But again, it shows a stagnant economy. There's very little growth. There's not much happening in the U.S. economy. Prices remain high. Grocery store prices remain high. CPI is slowly falling, which I will show you here in a few minutes. The Associated Press reported this, I would say, fairly by saying U.S. hiring fell sharply in July, an unexpected setback for the economy, stoking recession fears. And it's interesting looking at the reporting on this subject, because if you have Axios here saying employers added 114,000 jobs in July. Not too bad given that the economy has been near full employment. But that represents a significant deterioration so far this year. It's so hard for them to admit when there's bad numbers. It's just amazing for me to look and watch and see how it's like pulling teeth to get the mainstream media to admit something that's going to hurt the current administration. I mean, why can't we just call balls and strikes as they are? Now, some of you may be familiar with an indicator called the SOM rule, which is a recession indicator. It tells you when we are entering a recession. And what it does is it takes the average of the previous 3 months unemployment rate and compares it to the 12-month low unemployment rate. And if that 3-month average is higher than the lowest point seen during the 12 months prior, it indicates that we are in a recession, we are entering recession. Now, looking at the Federal Reserve of St. Louis Bank here's data, it shows, as of right now, the rate is at 0.53. So we are clearly, according to this data and this trend, we are entering a recession. As you can see here, COVID, recession. Financial crisis of 2008-2009, recession. 2002, short recession. So this indicator is pretty worthwhile. It's pretty reliable. And so it's just interesting to me. We have data indicators showing we're heading toward a recession. How this will impact the election is hard to tell right now. But as you can see here, this graphic is pretty brutal from Unusual Whales, a great Twitter account to follow, by the way. The stock market had a really, really rough day. Amazon down 9%, Tesla down 4%, Microsoft down 2%, NVIDIA down 2%. NVIDIA, I mean, arguably one of the most fast-growing companies in the world. Google down 2.5%. And that's going to go into our next story, which is that the Federal Reserve is rumored to be considering a rate cut this September and potentially up to 1.25 points before the end of this year, which would be a remarkable cut. It would definitely make a difference in the economy. Now, this rate cut is interesting when you look at it through the lens of housing supply. We all know the housing supply is lower than usual right now, and if you pair that with even a lower interest rate, it's going to potentially exacerbate the problem of low supply. You cut rates, money's going to become cheaper, and then houses are going to be potentially harder to obtain. And so I think that's something that we all should be aware of and prepare for, is that if we cut rates, there's going to be some ramifications in the economy, especially in the housing market. But taking a look here at the CPI the past 12 months, the Consumer Price Index, which measures a basket of goods that most Americans pay for to measure inflation reliably, has actually come down considerably, and that's actually a good sign, I will say. As you can see, CPI reached a peak recently in June of 2022, hitting 9% year over year, which means your gallon of milk is 9% more expensive than it was a year ago. But it's come down, hitting in 2023, June, hitting 3%, and it's maintained around 3%, which is good to see. A good way to tell if the Fed will cut rates is what's called the real interest rate, which means the difference between this number here, CPI, and the overnight federal funds rate, which is the effective funds rate that the Fed gives to banks for lending purposes. And so there's about a 2.5% difference almost, 2% between the effective federal funds rate, the overnight funds rate, and the 12-month CPI indicator. There's about a 2% difference there, which is plenty of breathing room for the Fed to cut rates and have, some breathing room in between those two numbers. So I do think it's likely the Fed will cut rates. Again, prepare yourself. The housing market is going to respond undoubtedly. But interesting things happening in the economy for sure. Now, this next story might shock you, and that is that the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency put out a bulletin announcement regarding elections and election integrity. And check out what they said. Here's the report right here. The FBI and CISA recommend voters take the following precautions: seek out information from official sources such as state and local election officials about registering to vote, polling locations, voting by mail, and final election results. If the official website for your election office is unavailable, contact your state or local election official. Remember that DDoS attacks cannot impact the security or integrity of the actual election system. So we have the FBI coming out ahead of time and saying, hey, by the way, your election websites and reporting and your numbers that you see on TV might be messed up and hacked, but it doesn't mean that the integrity has been affected whatsoever, which is really, really weird to me. I've actually, some of you guys may relate to this, but growing up, I actually played some video games, as some of you might have played, Call of Duty, Shooter, or whatever, maybe Madden. And sometimes your opponent growing up would DDoS your system and take out your system. And it would give them an advantage, and it would take you out in the competition. And essentially, the DDoS allowed them to have an advantage. And so I just don't understand if the DDoS attack was directed at the reporting software, if the DDoS attack was directed at the software that takes the votes and uploads them, how would that not affect the integrity of the election? It seems to me it's a little odd to say, hey, guess what? You should prepare. You should get ready for attacks, cyber attacks on the election software. But just in case that happens, it's not going to affect the integrity. The results are going to be fine, but it's just the reporting, the unofficial results might be affected, which, again, we've seen several people concerned about, especially former President Trump, saying we want same-day results. We want paper ballots. We want counting the same day. And how many countries have we seen overseas with very much less resources than the United States has when it comes to counting election tallies and totals, but yet they can count their election literally within hours. But we take days. In 2020, we took weeks for some states, and now we are putting out guidance saying, hey, guess what? Get ready. You might have to wait a while to get your results, but just trust us. It's not going to affect the integrity of the results. I just don't understand how you can put that out. How in the world can you know ahead of time that it's not going to affect the results of the vote when you're saying it's a hack? Like, if somebody's going to hack into the system of anything, there's really not much ability to predict how that's going to go. Of course, they could access the information, they could alter the information, they could prevent it from being uploaded, they could prevent the unofficial results from being reported. So there's very suspect information there, and I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. It just seems kind of weird to me. I'm leaving kind of an open question for you guys to respond and tell me what you think, but it's kind of strange to me. Now, the last thing I wanted to say today in today's show is Kamala Harris is reportedly considering Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, which has a fairly good rating from those on the other aisle. But that is causing people to look into Josh Shapiro's past and to do some digging on things he said in the past. And a good example of something I wanted to show to you guys in the light of the whole Olympics thing with the boxing situation where you had the person with the XY chromosome who was born a female and thinks they're a female, but they look like a male, and they have the Y chromosome. Josh Shapiro said something interesting, which goes against 70% of Americans' consensus on the subject, which is that men should not be able to go into women's locker rooms, men should not be able to go into women's sports, etc. And Josh Shapiro, as you can see here, August 11th, 2020, says, trans women are women, pass it on. And so I just want you guys to understand that the likely vice president pick for the Harris ticket believes that biological men should be able to compete, for example, in women's sports. He believes biological men should be able to go into the women's bathroom. He believes biological men are women. Do you guys really think that's somebody who should be at the helm of the second most powerful position in the United States of America? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. Personally, I don't really think somebody that has a delusion of that sort and that level should be near the top of our nation. And it's just crazy to see that this is becoming normal and it's becoming normalized. But that's our stories for the day. We have the economy crashing, the Kamala crash. We have the Fed considering a rate cut, and Shapiro's comments in the past, and the FBI releasing guidance on a potential cyber attack in the election. So let me know what you guys think. Are we facing a potential black swan event? Are we facing potential problems with the election? I certainly hope not, but let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to Grab Your Gear Network, and also Saving the Republic channel for clips of the show. And with that being said, I will see you next time. Peace out.